As a Studio Ghibli fan, there are questions that I have become accustomed to receiving. When I talk about how much I love these films, their imagination, their creativity, their sensitivity to the intricacies of everyday experience, and the depths of the most profound and subtle emotions, there are questions that people tend to ask if they're interested. The most common of these is, okay, what's your favorite Ghibli film? And my answer often is not what they expect. And they ask, okay, what's your second or third favorite Ghibli films? And my answers probably surprise them a bit more. If you asked the general public what their favorite Ghibli film is, the most common answer would be Spirited Away. And that's completely understandable. Spirited Away is a beautiful film. It is lovely and lush. It is subtly elegiac, discussing the decay of spirituality and a connection to the natural world in an age of increasing commodification, an age of increasing commercialization. It is a film that is subtly wistful, discussing loss and longing. But even if you do not key into those deeper undertones, as most kids and probably a good amount of adults do not, the film is still quite enjoyable. The designs are imaginative. The music is whimsical and yet sonorous and dreamlike. Chihiro is a sturdy foundation on which to build a story. She is this young girl who starts off a little naive and a little spoiled. She's not a bad person by any means, but she is very much a product of this specific commodified commercialist world that the film is opining against. She is used to instant immediate gratification, and when she is forced to look beyond that and summon up some internal strength, some internal vitality, she is able to do so. And she is able to escape the mistakes that befell her parents and form stronger connections with the world in which she finds herself. She steadily grows and matures, and by the ending of the film, she is quite confident and certain, and she has a deep level of personal self-fulfillment. That doesn't mean she's not subject to melancholy, dissatisfaction, uncertainty, or any of those other feelings and sensations that are inevitable to living in the unpredictable, chaotic world of experience, but she knows better how to handle them. The film is very sharp, it's very concise, it's very poignant and pointed, and it follows a very conventional narrative structure, even as it does so quite well and quite daringly. As an introduction to anime, I couldn't think of a better one. And yet, I fundamentally do not find as much satisfaction from that film as others do. In large part because it's a bit too neat and a bit too concise, even with all these deeper layers in it. My favorite films are a bit more enigmatic, a bit more ambivalent. My all-time favorite Studio Ghibli film is Princess Mononoke, which I once heard semi-jokingly described as an environmentalist film for people who hate environmentalist films, which is true to a certain extent. It's not dogmatic, and it's not fundamentally didactic. It's not designed to teach a lesson. It's not designed to teach people how to respect the earth. It's not that there is not this deep core of poignant lyrical connection to these ancient primordial ideas of nature and spirituality and this meditative, intense understanding of the outside world that extends beyond merely the ordinary and routine way in which we see it in our ordinary lives. Those ideas are very important to Princess Mononoke, and the film treats them with a level of reverence and a level of deep respect that is as evident here, if not more so, than in any other Ghibli film. And yet that primal, ancient ideal of nature is more fraught and more enigmatic. It is the forest spirit, who does not obey or even act in accordance with the whims of these wolves and boars, and instead has its own will that is fundamentally inscrutable. This natural ideal is threatened. It is dying. The world is changing. This pristine past, however beautiful as it might have been, can no longer be. And there are good sides to that. There are good sides to progress and commerce and the construction of human settlements and human ideas and technologies. But there is nonetheless a great and deep sense of loss that is, to a certain degree, unavoidable. The challenge Princess Mononoke poses is not how to reclaim this pure, pristine ideal, but how to understand its loss and how to respond to that loss in a healthy and equivocal way, while still maintaining a source of connection with the earth, with these ancient ideas of community, and not rushing full ahead into progress and technological advancements without looking at the negative consequences of that. It's a complicated film, and it's a film that does not provide these clear resolutions. And if there is one thing I would say binds together a lot of my favorite Ghibli films, it is specifically that, specifically the unwillingness to contain all of these palpitating, vibratingly strange and uncanny ideas and feelings within the boundaries of a traditional resolution. My favorite films by Studio Ghibli are, with the exception of Mononoke, films that are not really that overtly fantastical. Think of Porco Rosso, which, aside from the magical realist conceit about the pilot turning into a pig, is simply a poignant elegiac drama about war set in the interwar period in Italy. Think of Grave of the Fireflies. Think of The Wind Rises. These are my favorite Ghibli films. And there is perhaps no Ghibli film that more softly and subtly, yet devastatingly, embodies the ideal of what I find so appealing about these less overtly fantastical Ghibli films than Only Yesterday. What drives a film like this is not the conveyance of narrative. It is not plot points that are arranged linearly, with a protagonist progressing from one plot point, one area, one challenge to the next, as demonstrated by Chihiro in Spirited Away, or other fantastic Ghibli films, such as Castle in the Sky, such as Nausicaa in the Valley of the Wind, for instance. Rather, what Only Yesterday does is unite through the effulgent, diaphanously dreamlike medium of animation, the subtle nuances and subtle energies and vitality of experience with a luminous, dynamically conveyed idea. The idea, in the case of Only Yesterday, is not a simple theme like you get in an old 18th century philosophical novel where there very much is a point, such as, for instance, Candide, which I love, but Voltaire is very clearly trying to make a point, and the narrative exists in service of that point. It has more similarity to something like Plato's allegory of the cave than it does to the rich, subtle narratives that Ghibli at its best is able to convey. When I say idea, I mean this philosophical framework, this basic foundation for what the film is conveying. In Only Yesterday, it's something to the extent of, how do you react to this feeling of fundamental malaise, fundamental anxiety about a fragmented sense of meaning and a lack of purpose in a sleek but rather superficial modern world? How do you unite these different fragments of yourself together into a coherent whole? How do you live authentically in the true sense of that term? Authentically, not merely in the sense of not putting up a facade, which is, to a certain extent, unavoidable. We all put up facades at different points in our lives, even to ourselves, but how do we integrate all of these different fragments of ourselves into a coherent whole self that is united with what we actually want for ourselves? And how do we do that within the prism of memory, which is fundamentally strange and enigmatic, tossing back all of these fractured, deracinated fragments from an earlier period of our life to us? We did not ask for these fragments, but they come nonetheless. They are fragments from a period of life that was fundamentally a sense of transition, a sense of transience, a sense of passing through a threshold from childhood to adolescence. What use are these fragments of memories to the modern uneasy observer in trying to create a basic sense of identity? That is the fundamental challenge of the film, and it answers this challenge in a very subtle, quite funny sometimes, and very profound way. It is a film that was not translated into English until 2016, 25 years after its original release. This is not perhaps surprising, considering that the film is not what a lot of people expect when they think of Studio Ghibli, even though the film conveys that essence that makes Ghibli films so magical, that sense of intensity and immediacy of experience, of defamiliarizing the mundane and having it be revitalized into a new and more luminous perspective. What is ordinary, what is typical, becomes new. It becomes strange and wonderful and mysterious. And yet, none of these impressions are scattered. They're all in service of this philosophical framework that is talking about a lot of these daring and bold ideas. So, with that in mind, what is Only Yesterday about on a basic plot level? To phrase it that bluntly is almost a little perverse, because you could phrase this film in a way that makes it sound like a Hallmark movie. This hard-working city girl feels dissatisfied, so she goes to the country, decides that she is much more satisfied there. She feels like she's living a much more authentic life, and she marries a guy who is associated with this countryside. The big city is this enemy of authenticity, this enemy of truth and beauty and love and passion. And only by escaping to the country can Taiko, the protagonist, find a sense of stability and warmth. That is completely factually true. Raymond Williams, perhaps known for, among other things, his astute work on the pastoral, would discuss this film within the context of the idealization of the countryside, of the pastoral life, of an escape from the city. He would frame this within a tradition dating back to Hesiod and perhaps even more notably Virgil with his Georgics and his eclogues. Susan Napier perhaps helps us understand why this film is not that. Why this film is not tawdry tripe, to put it bluntly. Why it's not just a simple, banal story about why the city is bad and the countryside is good. Without the meditative elements, without the dreamlike memory sections, perhaps the film would feel to a certain extent like that. But it doesn't. The past sections are animated in a very specific way that, in their essence, do enough to justify why this film needed to be animated, why it could not have been done in any other way. There is a cursory, elliptical quality to these scenes in the past. There are only a few details in some of the scenes in the background. There is a lot of white, or these soft, watery colors, contrasted against the very bright colors that the characters wear in the past. It almost feels like a woodblock print in the traditional Japanese style. It feels wispy, it feels hazy, it feels like, well, a memory. It's trying to grasp at this half-remembered essence of an experience, and yet it is that essence that fundamentally has a sense of immediacy, a sense of vitality and vigor that the ordinary reality in the present does not always have, especially before Taiko reaches the countryside. A Freudian reading would psychologize and pathologize these memories. Freud would talk about, how she needs to work through the latent content of these memories, the latent trauma they have left her with, in order to reintegrate the parts of herself into a coherent whole and live a normal life as a fully formed, fully conscious person. And to a certain extent, that's an understandable perspective. I don't disagree innately. But it's not quite right, or it's not quite complete. There are elements missing from that Freudian perspective. What is missing above all is the sense of warmth and the sense of beauty and whimsy and strangeness in these memories. They are not simply mechanical blocks that she needs to try to work through in order to reach a place of basic fulfillment and self-actualization. They reinvigorate her. They have a positive effect. They are reminders of how the mind can be Bergsonian, how there is a difference between time as it is mechanically arranged day after day, hour after hour, and how the mind perceives time, where experiences 20 years in the past can feel as immediate and as close as experiences that happened very recently, perhaps even more real. The film's English title, Only Yesterday, captures that experience quite closely and quite directly, although we should be careful to not merely think of these memories as pure, wistful, playful things. They are not that, and they are not these horrible burdens that she must work through. They are both, and they are neither. There is no purpose to them. There is no cause in the material, science-like sense to them. If one felt that the film is having Taiko remember these things for the specific purpose of pushing her to go with Toshio or to go to the countryside, the entire organic structure of the film would be completely destroyed. What's great about these memories is that they are not teleological. There is no innate purpose to them. They simply well up, ambivalent and inscrutable. They allow her this access to this reservoir of her personal feelings and passions of the past that she had buried under this superficial life as this little office bee, this hard-working woman in a Tokyo office. To plunge beneath the surface that she had constructed for herself, she needs to do the difficult task of examining these memories, but also feeling them in all their intricacies and all their nuances, and through these memories, uniting herself as an adult to herself as a child, creating this basic sense of continuity, not just between the different fragments of herself in the present, but a continuity between past and present, to reinterpret and reorganize herself in all of these different intricacies into a whole and coherent person. Not simply in a way that makes her prepared to go to the farm or to go marry Toshio. That is secondary. That is important, but it is not what the film is about. This is not a Hallmark movie about everything being settled down and everything being tied together with a happily ever after. Things are not going to be perfect for Taiko. She knows this. She is honest enough with herself to admit that. And the film, through these vibrantly enigmatic memories, is her steadily moving through her past and attempting to accept that source of uncertainty, that source of complete transformation, that sense of not being fixed into a single narrow idea of who she is, of being willing to adapt, just like the farmer must, as Toshio keeps talking about, and yet stay true to what she really wants for herself. It's difficult and it's rewarding, and the film treats these ideas with all the complexity and all of the beauty that they deserve. So thank you all for watching. If you liked what you saw today, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Donate to my Patreon if you can, and you want to see more videos like this. I really am pleased to be able to provide y'all with a video on Only Yesterday. It is a plaintive, thoughtful film. It has that Mononoke sense of adequately mourning what was, of marking its passage, but also allowing that acknowledgement of what is past to create a greater sense of awareness of the world in all its transformations and nuances, instead of trying to erect a narrow and superficial idea of who we are and what we want for ourselves, as Taiko is attempting to do at the start of the film. So thank you all for watching. If you liked what you saw today, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Donate to my Patreon if you can, and you want to see more videos like this. Take care. Enjoy the holidays. Adios, comrades.